The world of random bends with the roll of one dice.
This is the story of a magical kingdom.
You're listening to KO City Pirate Radio. Welcome all you new brawlers out there.
But what if I told you there is another dice with the power to change everything?
Look at these dolls. Almost forgot they used to be humans.
Why'd you look like a blob of clay?
Wanna change back? What? Then you need to fix your relationship. I got this.
That's just mean. But get yourself a crew.
Pass to me!
You're not feeling it?
No.
Okay.
No, Dicey. They should be scared of us.
Hi, I am Todd Martins, a gaming journalist for the Los Angeles Times, and welcome to the EA Spotlight series. This is the second panel in which EA is connecting you with the games you love and the people who make them. Leading up to EA Play on July 22nd, EA invited me to chat with a number of their independent studios that are under the EA Originals banner. I was happy to do this. A lot of the games in independent space are some of my favorite games. They are games that tend to innovate both technologically and on the storytelling front. EA Originals was founded in 2015 with the mission statement to find, cultivate, build successful partnerships with some of the world's leading independent studios. The first game under the EA Originals banner, I believe, was Unravel from Coldwood Studios. It was one of my favorite games of that year. A number of these games have been recognized by the BAFTAs and other industry organizations. So with that, let's dig into the panel and meet some of the most thoughtful voices in the independent gaming space today who are working on projects under the EA Originals banner. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm super excited to talk to all of you. I think we've got kind of a cool range of voices, some different ideas. I just figured we'd do a real quick intro of just say your name and give a quick thought of your sort of non-game background as well, and then just real quickly say the first game you ever fell in love with. So Joseph, I'll throw it over to you.
Yes, my name is Joseph Fares, and I'm the creative director and founder at Hazelight, pretty much. I have actually a background in films. I've done 5 or 6 feature movies. I've been working with movies pretty much for 10 years and started making games for 10 years ago. And my first game I fell in love with have to be Super Mario Bros. 1, even if I actually started playing earlier with the Atari one.
Well, it's a classic and probably one of the greatest first levels of all time. Olav, let's hear a little bit from you and over at Zoink and some of the maybe non-game stuff you've dabbled in.
Hi. I'm Olof Redmalm, and I'm the creative director and the writer on Lost in Random. And well, my first big love within video games was Baldur's Gate, with its huge story and the possibility of creating your own story in that world. And I think I learned English playing that game too. And originally I'm a comic artist and a storyboarder when I started working with games. That's how I got my foot in there with drawing my ideas, explaining quickly with fast drawings.
So let's jump over to our team from Silver Rain Studios. So there's a new studio, and while we're not here to necessarily talk about the game you guys have, Abu, sort of talk a little bit about your background and starting this studio.
Yeah, hi. My name is Abu Bakr Salim, the creative director of our undisclosed game at Silver Rain Games. Originally actor, also done producing as well within the film industry and the TV industry. But yeah, decided to get into games because, I love games. One game that I fell in love with is Sonic the Hedgehog on the Sega. That's a pretty slick game.
Hi, I'm Melissa Phillips. I'm head of studio at Silver Rain Games, a studio that we launched in March 2020 last year. I have backgrounds in both music and psychology. I've got degrees in those, of which I weirdly use none of them, but all of them every single day in my job. And first game that I really loved and brought me into games was probably, either Theme Hospital or Populous: The Beginning.
Awesome. And Guha, congrats on the launch of Knockout City pretty recently this year. So you have a pretty wide-ranging background as well. I think a lot of people know some of your background in the tech side of games, but yeah, just give us a quick sort of intro on your world and your expertise and the first game you fell in love with.
Thank you, Todd. It's funny, if I talk about my non-games background, it's really going to very early childhood. Karthik, my brother, and I started our first game company, Vicarious Visions, when we were in high school. I was 14 and he was 15, and basically that was all about learning how to make a video game. And while we played many video games, the actual process of peeling back how you construct it, every aspect of the creative process, playing all the roles when there are no instruction books on how to do it, that was just so fascinating and continues to drive us. And so with Valen Studios, our mission is really to find those new types of interactivity that the people that are really unexpected. People really wonder where they come from, and you really need to get your hands on them to be able to understand it. Now, back in the day, what really got me interested was a game called Starflight 2. Actually, I played Starflight 1 after 2. It was a PC game, MS-DOS at the time. But it just showed with even limited technology, you can really open the imagination and make non-linear narrative where you really put the player as the hero and as the center of an adventure and the center of a progression. And that unlocks so much for us.
So I don't want to put the new studio on the spot, but I guess I'm going to do that a little bit. Abu, just talk a little bit about, you said you've loved games, but your decision to, really want to express that love by starting a studio, the journey from starting that studio to working with EA Originals, and we'll start there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of power in storytelling in games, because I feel like you got the audience playing it and interacting with the characters on the screen, or really kind of shaping the story that's going on, or you get them in that journey. They're in their shoes. The way I kind of see it is like, I'm a storyteller by heart, right? So it's just another way or another voice or another platform to tell those stories on. It's a great journey because we're just all a bunch of kids wanting to play storytellers, right? And yeah, that's what it is.
It's funny, isn't it? We have, between us, we've got a number of years in the games industry, and we knew a lot about playing games and how games were made and the people behind them. But actually being on the other side now, it's been a whole learning experience. The last year has been a baptism of fire, I guess, as we make mistakes, but we learn from them. And I think that's what's really lovely about the studio with Silver Rain, is that we really value the team that we have. It's an incredible team, just over 30 people now, and still growing. We've always got jobs on the website if anyone wants to check that out.
Starting big, man. 30 people already. Damn.
Listen,
I remember.
That's one of our learnings, Joseph. That's one of our learnings. Don't pick 30 people every year.
Yeah. I remember when I did Brothers, we were like 10 people, now 8 or 9 people. You start big. Now, I just want to add something to that, because I have a bit kind of the same background from a movie. I just want to make something clear to add a little bit what you were talking about. For me, these two are two entirely different mediums. It's very important to remember that, because one is interactive and one is passive. Because one thing I've learned is that games are not movies. And I think sometimes it's the opposite. When you want to make a game that's closer to a movie, there are two entirely different mediums. You could get inspired from each other, but the way, for instance, to write a book or to write a screenplay are two entirely different ways of writing stuff. And this is what we need to do for games as well. So I'm a super optimist in impactful stories and and emotional impacts on people in the future. We're just there. We're just like scratching the surface.
We had a dark period in games, and it occurred between like 2000 approximately and 2010, where there was a notion among companies that you would see the film and then play the game, as if the interactivity would be the same as a linear medium. And you try to capture empathy like affection and love and drama and tension between a boy and a girl, but with mechanics like shooting and action. And there would be a total mismatch. And this is sort of the big downfall of narrative experiences of the past.
It makes a lot of sense also to tell a story in video games, because you're always following the interactivity. You're always looking at the step-by-step experience of the player and like really immersing yourself in what will they actually experience, what will they see, and what will they feel. And for me, that makes so much sense to tell a story in video games because, yeah, you're really putting yourself in the situation in a different way, I think, and it's helped me a lot to learn about writing scripts as well, like longer scripts, because you have to fill in the details. You can't leave anything to the imagination until it's in the player's hands. Yeah.
Why'd you look like a blob of clay?
Wanna change back? Then you need to fix your relationship.
You know, It Takes Two, Joseph, is a really fascinating game to me. It deals with a lot of grown-up topics, yet at times it feels very silly, very wacky, and at times the gameplay almost feels like a metaphor of this couple's relationship. So just talk about sort of the challenge of telling what is, what on the surface is a very sort of classic story about a couple, but then making that come through via the actions you're taking in the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what we at Hazelight are focusing a lot on, like trying to use the mechanics as part of the storytelling. You don't want to end up in a situation where you play a game. I mean, you could play some games sometimes where you're almost waiting for the next cutscene. So the idea here is to use the mechanics as part of the story. I think it's a little bit underused in gaming now, and I think we can use it way more often. I mean, It Takes Two, you have many situations. Sometimes we use it in a metaphorical way there's a level where the characters are working on their attraction as couples, and then we give them magnets just kind of as a metaphoric way for them to both play that and have it in the story. But also it could be that, whatever they meet, if they meet like a hammer from a toolbox that they own or something, you're actually playing. So you're playing what you're seeing, and immediately you use the mechanics as part of the storytelling. You could also use the mechanics in a sense to convince an emotion for the player. I mean, for instance, the first game I did, Brothers, I'm going to spoil it a little bit if someone haven't played it, but in the end, you're actually literally like playing, like burying your big brother that dies in the end a little bit. So it's almost, and I would say the opening of Last of Us, where you carry your girl and runs with her, like everything, like you're using the mechanic to push your storytelling, and that is a bit underused sometimes, and I think we can push that even more, and that's what we at Hazelight want to keep pushing.
The world of random bends with the roll of one dice.
Olav, Lost in Random looks beautiful.
Thank you.
And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about, and let sort of people watching know sort of about the tone of that game, the big picture sort of tone of that game, but also how that sort of pairs with, the gameplay and, the quote unquote randomness that you guys are trying to sort of come about in how we play that game.
Yeah, in Lost in Random, so it's a dark fairy tale. It's an action adventure, and you play as this girl who grows up in this. There are 3 wards in the land of random. One ward for each side of a 6-sided dice, and this dice belong to an evil queen, of course, and she rules. She creates these weird systems to keep these places in check, and so every world has its own theme. When we first started with the project, we wanted to do something darker, so a fairy tale that was a little bit darker than the rest of the stuff we'd already made. And we tried out drawing all these different characters and concepts, but it wasn't until this painting of a dice and her girl appeared that we knew that there is something to explore. The concept of a living dice as a companion of the protagonist was attractive to us. Another scary thing was, what will the gameplay be like? What is too random and what is just random enough? Everything revolves around the dice and grows out of this dice, the theme and the gameplay. So it's been a great concept, very natural to, like, everything's grown very natural out of it. And it's so important to like, if you have an idea that is weird and you're uncertain of it at first and it hasn't been done before, you don't have a reference game, you need to ask people for a bit of faith to stick with the idea and just stay with it. And okay, we're not sure what it will be, but it's important to let yourself to be, I don't know, let's not know together for a while and explore this weird idea and see where it goes. Yeah.
I was just going to add in, actually, everything that everybody said is just lovely, and it's exactly why I love working in games. And what makes the games industry really special. My fear, and actually something to perhaps pose back to the group, is that I always worry about whether we can hold on to this authenticity as an industry, because the more interested that business and other industries become in us, the more at risk we are of losing that authenticity. I think we're having a sort of golden age at the moment where this freedom is allowed, and people like myself can start to see themselves coming through in these stories. And I hope that we can keep that alive and keep that going, and that authenticity isn't lost or merged into other industries.
You know, I think that's exactly why we're indie studios, because that authenticity is worth the struggle. It's worth fighting for. And it takes an independent mindset to really push the boundaries, to be able to take the risk to come out of a typical business model or a typical franchise stream to create a unique emotional experience for players. And we've made active choices to have that flexibility. And it comes along with it some kind of burden as well. It's not as predictable. It's not as bankable. You know, a lot of the risks meet with failure, and that has to be a learning experience. And that sounds a little trite, but every indie game cycle involves that.
I wouldn't be too worried, actually. I think if you have when you have a strong vision, what you believe in, I think actually it's the opposite. The other industries around us, I mean, if you look at the movies, if we're talking about that, they will soon realize how great storytelling is in gaming, and actually are realizing it already.
That's my fear, Joseph. That's my fear.
Don't worry, there's nothing to fear here. They will come. I know the movie business. They will come crawling and understand how beautiful gaming is. Now, at the end of the day, it's all about like, you know, impacting and touching people's heart.
Here.
Guha, I wanted to sort of bring it up with you with Knockout City, because when people talk about that game isn't necessarily a quote-unquote a narrative game. It is a sport, you know, dodgeball inspired. You know, but at the same time, when I played that game, the first thing that struck me was the emotion of that game. Like the tone of that game, the way it looked, the way it felt. It was very bright. It was extending a hand to the player. It felt very welcoming. You know, but and we don't necessarily put that up front when we talk about games. We talk about it as a dodgeball, as a mechanic, as a you do this, you fight this, you X, Y, Z. We don't necessarily talk about the emotion.
You know, it's a great point, and it's actually one of the ways that we center discovery at Valon Studios, which is when we create something that feels like the core of something new, a game worth making, we try to ask the question, how do you feel? And when we found this kind of throwing and catching, you know, just imagine, you know, when we were playing throwing and catching, you know, some of us do, I do it all the time with my children, for example, but, you know, through childhood, it's one of the universal narratives. When you do throwing and catching and special things with it in all sports, it makes you feel energetic. It energizes you. It's a joy when you catch the tough pass. And so we said, okay, this is the start of something, joyful competition. We don't see that in games that much. Let's build on that. And then the world gives us the grounding. Knockout City, we invented it as a place to say, how do we experience this joyful competition? A world that's sort of the way we imagine it should be. Inclusive, welcoming. Everything is settled with epic dodgeball battles that make it so even if you're outgunned and outnumbered, with your skill, you can actually make a difference. But then, even if you get defeated, you're ready to get back into it because you feel like you weren't beaten. You feel like you're ready to be back in the competition. So we start with that emotional profile, and all the decisions from a design standpoint, from a world building standpoint, from a music design standpoint, come from that. We didn't have some backstory to make sure that and we don't explicitly do it, we don't use narrative techniques, but it's in the world and it's in the VO. It's to be able to make people feel like they're grounded in this and they can be part of that experience. So we start with mechanics at a core that feel novel, interesting, compelling, but really they're only successful if they elicit some kind of novel emotional response that says, I'm here to play with my friends and feel something different. So we use different techniques in narrative to be able to achieve that.
And Abu, I was kind of curious to hear your thoughts a little bit. Just we've talked, you know, in the last few minutes about some like high level topics about emotion in games and marrying gameplay and story, and just sort of coming at this from a new studio. I know we're all curious to hear what you're working on when you're ready to talk about it, but what would you sort of say, like, what would be maybe like a thesis for the studio in terms of where you guys want to put a focus?
Yeah, I mean, look, it does start with story, right? And it starts it starts there, but it's quickly followed by, again, the medium in which you're telling it, which is interactivity. I think you know, for us as well, we're always asking about that player's journey, about that player's experience, and that's why it's funny whenever we talk about the idea of, like, you know, emotion in games and stuff like that. Like I don't think that's not the aim, man. Like, the aim is to deliver a brilliant experience. Like, you don't go to the theater to go and, you know, watch a play which is supposed to be sad. No, you go watch a good play. If it's sad and it's happy, that's fantastic. And it's tough, man. Like, making games isn't easy. It's a hard process, but that's what's so brilliant and beautiful about it, because I truly believe that through the difficulty of finding something and hitting it right, you end up basically sharing that difficulty and that hard journey with the person playing it. They feel that, and they are able to experience that with you.
I was just going to add in as well, and here's the kicker. Like, ideas are cheap. Everybody has ideas. My mom has ideas. My dog has ideas. I have ideas. You know, we are a team where everybody has the capability of being creative in some way. The hard part, I think, of game making is how do we choose which ideas we take forward out of this mad pool of ideas that we have. And I think the craft comes from being able to select the best, sometimes just the most feasible ideas, not even the best. We sometimes have to kill some fantastic ideas. But the game making process is about how do we prioritize what goes forwards, what feels good. And the craft comes from actually making those ideas and testing them and iterating on them and making sure that all of that comes together to create the game.
When I was playing It Takes Two, I went into that game, you know, the pandemic was still very much a mystery here in America at that time. And then there was the other idea of, like, I was also going through a relationship that was falling apart. So I didn't necessarily, I was nervous about playing It Takes Two because I was like, do I want to play a game about a divorce? At the same time, like, that game is so silly and fun and inventive. Like, I never once felt necessarily quote unquote sad. I just felt exuberance at, like, learning about these characters.
Someone asked me, like, is this kind of a relation, you know, ship to help you? It's kind of a therapy session or something. The funny part is that we saw already in the testing already when playing the game that if you're in a relationship that wasn't so good, it was quite clear actually, because you really had to, you know, it's almost like the experience are in the couch. That's almost also how we designed the game. So if you're playing this with your partner and your communication is not right, then you're not going to be able to play the game that good. So not only will the game be you know, not have the same fluidness in the game, you will also maybe say something about your own relationship, that something is not working. And from that perspective, we're seeing, I mean, reactions today, I don't know how accurate or true they are, of people actually, you know, asking each other to get married after the game and stuff like that. And that's quite cool, actually, if it's true. I don't know, but that's how they write to us. I have to accept that it is a true thing. But it's a good way to get to know, like, where you are at in your relationship, because obviously communication is key. I mean, yes, it takes two. It takes two to communicate as well.
Guha, I wanted to sort of transition a little bit and hear your thoughts on, with sort of a game like Knockout City, which is going to be an ongoing game and is going to evolve. You know, you and the team are maybe thinking about adding some story, but keeping that sort of lively and keeping that constantly sort of fresh. And the way, you know, a game studio can experiment with a live service game in ways that, you know, we don't get in other mediums.
You know, Todd, the mindset for us always was, let's get the game out and then see how the community responds and embraces it, and then evolve it with the community. And so from the very early onset, it was designed as a sort of a live service product, which finds an audience and then follows the audience and evolves it and continues to surprise. So we have a slew of content that's actually in production that will be available. And the idea is surprise them with new things that can change up the play. Now we'll have Evolution of the Hideout, which is your interactive social lobby where you team up with friends before you get into a game, instead of waiting at a menu to be able to find out if they show up and, you know, that kind of thing. And so it's really interesting. You know, the early prototypes of Knockout City started in 2017, so a little over 4 years before it was launched. That's a longish cycle for a game, but it feels like we're still at the starting line. You know, the launch is the start.
You know, there's this conversation always in pop culture amongst fans and amongst creators that it's like everything has to be based on IP. And in the independent game world, this is where all of like originality is. You know, and I was kind of curious, Olav, to hear, you know, you talk a little bit about the studio and deciding on Lost in Random and like what was the sense of, you know, because as Melissa was saying earlier, like everybody has ideas. So what was the sense of like, this is something that we can experiment with, both as a studio, that we can experiment with as artists, but something we feel good about, you know, committing, you know, X amount of years of our lives to?
For me personally, of course, there's great value in looking at the market and what people are playing right now, but people won't be playing what they are now in a couple of years. So why not just go with what's fun and weird in the moment? It's a very arts-driven studio, always has been, Zoink. Driven by Klaus Lyngeled, who's now the head of the development, and he's usually the guy like while we're sweating and finishing the previous game. He's like, guys, what do you think about a giant ghost in VR? And we're like, yeah, we gotta finish this thing first, but sounds great. Give us some time and digest it. Abu already said also we're all just kids playing like, oh, then this guy comes and he fights this guy and they're brothers actually, and why? Like that kind of energy you want to bring to creating video games, I think. So yeah, just go with that creative joy. And for us, it started out with wanting to try out something darker, like I already said, and our longing for a fantasy and a saga. And, you know, we looked at grim fairy tales and we love Over the Garden Wall and stuff like that. And even if the idea at first makes everyone go, really? Okay, a dice with legs and arms. And okay, let's taste it for a bit and like, don't be afraid of the can of worms. Yeah, I guess is the message. Yeah.
Just wanted to say, like, that is actually a perfect sort of analogy in a way of what the originals like team do in regards of like, they're not afraid to take a risk. Like you will come in with a crazy idea and you'll come in with something quite out there, something that's not really necessarily been seen or sounds dangerous or sounds hard. And they will be like, you know what, go for it. They give you that space and room to play, which is so beautiful and rare to see in a lot of spaces in the arts. Look, I'm doing a show at the moment out here called Raised by Wolves, and the first 2 episodes of the season. Thanks.
You were great.
The first.
I've been waiting
Thank
to say
you very
that for
much.
so long. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, no, but like, look, the first 2 episodes, right, were directed by Ridley Scott, and it's terrifying, right? It's one of those things where it's like you're going head to head with this Goliath, right? But the beauty of what he was able to capture on set was he allowed you room to play. He allowed you room to be bold. He allowed you room to just explore, which is so rare sometimes.
I think every publisher should do this, actually. Focus on creative, crazy games that does something very different, but doesn't have the major financial risk. Because I understand, like, you want to put $100 million or something that's crazy risky. However, though, those smaller games that are crazy and more creative adventure, you can actually see stuff functioning and working, and then you can actually inspire the AAA also as well.
You know, Joseph, I want to look at that and say, you know, it's not just about inspiring AAA, it's about saying, you know, all new novel concepts can start small. You know, it's the kind of the simple as hard concept. You know, when we wrote if you write the concept for Knockout City on a piece of paper, people will be like, I'm going to play this action game with dodgeballs. Give me a gun. I think I know how to do that. And so that's typically the response for that. But the concept itself can be proven out at a small scale, and the concept itself can grow. And it can be grown by you, Joseph, in your context, by us from a Knockout City standpoint. But it's the ability to recognize that's something special. Both the developer recognizes, but then also, you know, the label should recognize as well and believe in. One of the things that was most impressive to us was that after we had found this core and, you know, we thought, hey, this is a good game. I'm feeling what I need to feel with this thing. We shopped it around. And there was something unique about the originals team in EA. Everybody played. Everybody, all the way to the executive team at EA played before we said, that's the right partner for us. Because they could understand that vision. They could see it. And they said, okay, we're ready to take a risk. Not a huge risk, but we're ready to take a risk and a series of sequential bets because this game needs to come out.
Well, and Knockout City was also kind of a risk for the studio as well. Like you guys had to create pretty much a new game engine for this project.
Yeah, I mean, there was nothing like it before, and there's a good reason. It's really hard to do a mechanic that's purely based on throwing and catching, essentially physics-based gameplay in a competitive setting, where there are many physics objects the player him or herself could be, themselves could become the ball, that there's an ever-changing map landscape with dynamic maps, and fundamentally relies on the interactivity between the team, throwing, passing, catching. When you have a player on the East and West Coast or East Coast and then in Europe playing together or playing against each other, it's an incredibly hard problem to solve, and we couldn't find conventional approaches to do it. So we had to invent a computer language to be able to allow us to do reversible computation at scale. And that's pretty much how we approach problem solving here at Velen. It's sort of like, you know, if this game needs to be made, we're going to figure out how to do it.
I just want to add on, even if we're working with Unreal, you know, but let me tell you this, the amount of stuff we added on to make an online game also function in split screen with so much variety in game mechanics, it's absolute madness. Actually, I know that we made more tools that Unreal are using from us than we are using from them. So in a sense, we created our own. I mean, it's a huge challenge to create an online game. I mean, I mean, especially in split screen where you see the lag and everything. So there's, I think whoever has an engine, you need to do a lot of add-ons that fits your vision and game, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, I was curious, Joseph, if being an indie studio, if you felt that made that task of having to sort of invent those tools, even using a popular game engine and just being independent, if that made it, you know, easier for you guys, like as a studio, to sort of shift directions at whims, or because it seems like it is a very big of a mission statement for your studio to do sort of co-op sort of games.
I wouldn't call us indie right now. I would say we're a bit, I mean, we're more a triple I, as they say today, not just a regular indie. So we have more knowledge. Our developers are more are more kick-ass. They know more how to do stuff. We know more how to solve stuff. We've done it before, so we have the tools to do it way better than before. But of course, it's always a risk, especially the games we do, because every game we do is something totally different. Obviously, you have co-op and story that is common to what we do, but the world, the characters, the gameplay, everything is totally different in the next game. Let me tell you, it will blow people's mind, actually.
I'm ready to hear about it.
Are you really? Are you ready? Can you handle it? That's what I'm telling you, man. Next game will be like, what the? These guys have really lost their minds. I mean, totally, in a good way.
Bring it on. You know, we've touched on a lot of different topics today, and, you know, just on the subject of being an independent studio and the ways an independent studio can innovate in maybe ways other studios can't, just kind of wanted like a real quick sort of hit from each one of you on your studios and like where you want to go in the future when it comes to innovation.
So at Hazelight, what we want to push all the time is combining the story and the gameplay. We push that a lot, using the mechanics more and more to try to tell a story, use the mechanics to reflect what goes on in the story, create unique, cool experience that players haven't played before. Now is the time to make something totally great and unique. It's harder in a movie today because it's been going on for longer. So in a sense, it's a good time to make something great.
You know, for Velen Studios, it's, you know, our games have come to be really sort of playing is believing. But playing is believing is really at the heart of creating something new. An experience that people really think is novel. I haven't seen something like this before. And that's what we want to keep doing.
At Zoink, I feel like we're always looking for new ways of delivering story and dialogue, and because it's such a diverse industry with so many different people and backgrounds and ways of thinking and working, from programmers to artists. So I think that, I mean, that's such a huge, fun, inspiring part, and why I love working with games.
I was going to say, we are so young as a studio that I think we're incredibly grateful for the fact that we get to do something that we really love. I don't think either of us realized how much we were going to love working on this game. And part of that is the unknown. To have come as far as we have in 1 year, I'm so excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I feel like we do have a voice, and we're still finding our voice, and we're growing not only as a studio and evolving at such a rapid pace, but we're having fun while doing it as well. And I think it's about sharing that fun and sharing our experience, our highs and lows, and just being open. Because again, that's also part of it, right? It's about being open, about sharing.
Thank you all for letting me pester you with so many questions and playing along, and I really appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you.
So that was all very thoughtful and very inspirational at times. Thank you for joining us. More from the EA Play Live Spotlight series will be coming soon. Follow @EA on Twitter or go to EA.com for the latest updates on these games and everything else from the studio. Also remember that EA Play Live is on July 22nd. And if you've watched this far, you definitely don't want to miss that because there will be some exciting news from Lost in Random. I'm Todd Martins from the Los Angeles Times. Thank you for joining us.